Good afternoon. Welcome to what we call the Big Show. It's the Big Show every single day at about 5 o'clock. We do it here at Post-Gazette on the YouTube channel and, of course, on Twitter and everywhere else. So hopefully you make us a stop, a place you visit every single day, and you do that. Of course, today, Friday, we had a special guest in that Mike Logan from the Steelers stopped by. Every so often, we'll do that where we'll have some guests just to discuss different things. So I think that this weekend, how do I say this politely? How do I say this politely? Pittsburgh sports stink right now. Is that a good way to say what's going on here? Let's start there. I mean, we're going to talk about the Steelers, and of course, Deebo Samuel went from one team to another, and there are some people that seem to be upset about it, but we'll talk about that. There's a number of things that we're going to talk about, but let's talk about right now. Pittsburgh sports stink. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this, and I don't know if I really believe this. But I'm starting to think that the best chance of the Pittsburgh, us here in Pittsburgh, of seeing a success will be the Pirates. Now, I don't know if I really believe that. But this past weekend, as far as, for instance, Pitt basketball, it's over, so to speak. Over. There's zero chance now they're making the NCAA tournament unless they win the ACC. Their last chance was beating Louisville, winning their last game, then maybe winning a couple of games in the NCAA tournament and having a chance. I don't even think that's going to happen. I mean, they have no chance now losing to Louisville. And it was a game. It's very, like many games this year, very winnable game. They just didn't win. I would also say this. It's over for the Penguins too. I mean, we all want to hold out hope that, that core of players is going to, figure it out because they're just a bunch of winners and they know how to do it. Look, they've now lost 6 of their last 7. 6 of their last 7. In their last 7 games, they've gotten a total of 3 points. It's not enough. Now they're just sort of playing out the string. And, the hope is that, there was some discussion about trying to get some of these guys to waive their no-trade clause. Again, one of the biggest problems that the Penguins have is they got too many guys on no-trade clauses and they can't get rid of them. But look, it's not – how do I say this? It's not anything at all that I would tell you is a secret here. And what I mean by that is their goal differential is minus 50. They're every bit as bad as you think they are. Maybe worse. That's what's scary to me. And so, this weekend pretty much was the end for them. Pitt basketball done. Robert Morris basketball is at least coming back and good, but that's kind of a niche audience. It's not like there's a large audience for that. There are some people that, follow it that went to school there and everything else. So I'm thinking about this entire – and look, the Steelers, at least they still have a winning record and get to the playoffs. But let's be honest. Is anybody really happy with what they did last year? Is there anybody that's really happy with what they did last year? That's what I'd like to know. Because I can't see how anybody could be happy with what the Steelers did last year. So I'm looking at it and I'm saying Pittsburgh sports really stink right now. And it might be a situation of where the team that has to save us from ourselves is maybe the Pirates. But I don't know that we've seen anything going on in this offseason that makes you think they're going to be better than they were last year. It's just going to be really interesting in many, many ways. It's going to be very, very interesting to see if the Pirates can have any kind of success this year. See, if the Pirates were able to do what the Steelers did, that is just one of those things where if he's able to if they're able to make the playoffs, even if they lose in the first round, I think people will be okay with it. I think. But again, I don't even know if that's going to happen. But I will say, I think the Pirates are probably the closest to getting themselves right. The Pirates are probably the closest to getting themselves right. And I don't know that that's a good thing for the other teams, but it's the truth. The Penguins have a long way to go. They've got to figure out, what they want to be. And I don't think there's any way now to deny, the fact that, hey, it's time to do a full rebuild. The Steelers, to me, are kind of stuck in a place where I don't know that there's a really good path out. I just don't. So I'm looking at this sports scene right now in Pittsburgh, and I'm saying I think we are really in a lot of a bad way for a while. Like, I don't even know who I would pick in Pittsburgh to win the next championship. Pitt football isn't very good either. At least they weren't. Just not very good. So that's what we're dealing with. I thought this weekend was probably the end for Pitt hoops and for the Penguins. And as a result, when you think about it, it means now we have to basically hope that some of us will hope that Robert Morris is able to get to the NCAA tournament, but at the end of the day, even if they do, they'll be a really low seed. It'll be a difficult stretch for them. I would assume they'll be one and done, but it's still nevertheless an incredible story. But we just are looking at a bunch of teams that aren't very good, period. And I'm just not sure when, I'm really not sure when we can expect it to get better. And that's what's really depressing. On to the Steelers. We're talking about, obviously, Deebo Samuel. And again, there are a number of people in this town, media guys included, who seem to be in love with the idea of collecting as many big names as you can possibly find. Even if those big names can't help you anymore. Even if those big names aren't any good anymore. Even if those big names are guys that, maybe at one point were good, but now either they don't fit what the Steelers really need or they're just not that good. That's what I'll tell you is the problem right now. Stop trying to, accumulate all of these guys just because they've got, there were people that were actually seriously talking about Aaron Rodgers. And Matthew Stafford, to me, I didn't really care that much about that because I knew he was never, ever going to be available and they were never going to pay what it took. But I'll be honest with you, it's one of those things where Matthew Stafford is another guy. I don't know how much he has left. I just don't. And then I think that it's really, really important to note that if you don't have that much left, then what are we talking about bringing you here for? And Deebo Samuel is a guy I just don't think has anything left in the tank. I watched the 49ers a number of times last year, and the thing I will tell you that I always came away is thinking this guy is slow, this guy is overweight, this guy isn't running great routes anymore, this guy is not a dangerous player anymore. This guy scares nobody. And people wanted to blame the quarterback, of course, because, for whatever reason, people hate the quarterback, and I don't understand why. The guy threw for 3,800 yards, and if you look at what he had, his number one, running back, the best weapon on the planet, when he's healthy, he played 4 games. He played 4 games. His, the receiver that everyone spent all last summer talking about trying to trade for, Ayuk, he played 7 games. And then you look at Deebo Samuel, and he played 15, but he's not good. You want to talk about what happened to the 49ers? That's a big part of the story right there. All of their weapons are gone. Because, that means the quarterback, he's not that good. Well, if you take away all of the weapons from any quarterback outside of maybe Mahomes, who last year won a Super Bowl with basically a decent tight end and a bunch of guys that can't catch. Outside of him, if you take away the weapons of just about anybody, they're not going to be very good. But my biggest thing was Deebo Samuel just wasn't great. He ran, 42 times for 136 yards, 3.2 per carry. He had 1 touchdown rushing. His longest run was 13 yards. I mean, that scares nobody. He had 51 receptions, for 670 yards. Okay, whatever. 3 touchdowns. He scares nobody. He no longer scares anybody, which is why the Commanders took a flyer on him for a 5th-round pick. It's amazing. Think about what people were talking about before last season, what the Steelers should try and do to get Deebo Samuel. And it turns out all it took was a 5th-round pick because he can't play anymore. You can't just acquire names. You can't acquire guys that you think used to be good or might have been used to be good or whatever. You can't do that. Because at the end of the day, it does not work. You got to get guys that are going to help you get better. The Steelers need guys that are going to change the trajectory of their offense and make them a better team. So let's stop talking about all these other guys and all of these guys who can't help anymore. Period. Deebo Samuel is somebody who probably was a lot more intriguing, last couple of years than he is right now. Now, he just sort of isn't very good. He looks like a guy who probably, his best days are way behind him. So then you go to the free agent market, right? Here's a listing, and this is one ranking of them, okay, of the best free agent receivers. Stephon Diggs, coming off a major injury. Probably not interested in him. Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, 33 years old. I think he's good, but I don't think he's that good. Not good enough to really change your team. Amari Cooper, I'd have some interest in that. Chris Godwin, I might have some interest in that, right? But after that, we're talking about guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams, who the Pirates or the Steelers already have, Hollywood Brown. I mean, there's just not, again, I guess Cooper, Godwin, those are 2 guys I might be interested in. Maybe Brandon Cooks a little bit. The bottom line is those guys are going to cost a lot of money because there's not a lot of names on the board. It's a supply and demand type thing. Diggs and some of these other guys, guess what? They're probably going to get overpaid. Because when you start really going down a list of free agent receivers, do you know what you realize? There ain't many that are any good. And I shouldn't say any good. There aren't game changers. Really. I mean, the Steelers probably, in order to make it work, the Steelers probably are going to make it like this. They have to probably trade for one and go out and find a guy that's available that a team is trying to, get out from underneath that you might be able to get for a reasonable trade, price. That's really what it is, if you ask me. I just think that the Steelers have to be bold this year. They really do. But in order to be bold, okay? In order to be bold, it means you're going to have to think outside your box, the box, and really be ready to go ahead and make some trades, go out and try and make sure that you're getting the best players you can get. Be willing to spend some money, period. And I think that's, what this offseason has to be about. I don't want to hear about the Steeler way anymore. I don't want to hear about the Steeler way. I don't want to hear about the way they do things. I don't want to hear about they're being really conservative. I don't want to be about, I just don't. And I think that that's what it comes down to. They've got to try and make themselves better in ways that means they've got to be bold. You're not going to get better if you're just going to try and cherry pick guys off the free agent list, draft in the third or fourth round guys and hope, do the things they do where they're just trying to make smaller investments. They don't ever want to make a splash trade kind of thing or whatever. Last year, I guess they went and got Patrick Queen. They've got to do more of that, only they need to do it at a couple positions. But if they're holding out for, drafting a receiver, I don't know if that's going to be the best thing to do. I think they really, really need to try and do the best they can possibly do to get a game changer on offense. They don't have enough guys on offense that scare you. And quite frankly, if you ask me, I would tell you this. They're going to sign, it sounds like they're going to sign Justin Fields, although, again, we have source wars going on. I call it source wars, right? Well, some guys are saying it's Russell Wilson. Other guys are saying it's Justin Fields. I've said all along it's going to be Justin Fields. I almost don't care about the quarterback spot anymore. I just sign a guy and let's move on. All these other guys over here that have all these quote-unquote sources, let them go do something else other than every single day try and guess and figure out what the quarterback spot is. I've made it very clear. I think it's going to be Justin Fields' job. It should be. It probably will. So let's say that is settled. This team needs guys who are game breakers on offense. I've said this many times. They're paying all this money to stars on defense. They need to go get some offense. They need a T.J. Watt on the offensive side of the ball. They need a Cam Hayward on the offensive. They got one, George Pickens, the one guy that scares you, and he's the guy they've got to sign. We can sit here and talk about that all we want. But if they don't go get guys, and again, the reason I'm looking at this, Deebo Samuel thing and saying, why would they even want him, is because so many people want to talk about every single time one of these receivers comes on the market that the Steelers should get it. I mean, it's crazy. Guy can't play anymore. And if he can't play, why are we getting him? Why do you want him? Other than, well, it's like fantasy football or something. Makes no sense to me. Makes absolutely no sense to me. So I feel like, if we're going to sit here and talk about, Deebo Samuels and whatnot, we're missing the boat. Go get guys that can actually help you win. Period. And whoever those guys are, wherever they're at, go find them. Go find them. Period. And that's what I would tell you have to do. And it makes absolutely no sense at all to me, some of the stuff that I've been reading for this entire offseason. Ask yourself this question. Before you propose that the Steelers go get a guy, ask yourself this question. Does he legitimately make them better? And if he doesn't make them better, why are we talking about it? If it's another average guy, if it's another guy that just, why are we talking about it? Honestly, it doesn't make sense to me. Now, let's move on to Pitt Hoops for a little bit here. And the only reason I'll say this is because Jeff Capel talked today and basically said one of the biggest problems that, the ACC has is they have fallen behind. They've fallen behind on their investment. They haven't paid enough in NIL, and they haven't, put enough money into these programs, and that's, the investment they fell behind on. I don't know that I buy that completely. I think that's part of it. But you know what? A lot of these teams have good players. That's not the problem. That is not the problem. As I've said many times, start in about 2014 or 15. They lost Jamie Dixon. Haven't adequately replaced him. Rick Pitino, haven't adequately replaced him, although this guy they seem to have right now seems to be a good coach. We'll see. Roy Williams, haven't adequately replaced him. Coach K, we'll see what happens with this guy, but he's clearly not Coach K. Tony Bennett just left, but again, another Hall of Famer. Mike Bray was a great coach for a long, long time. Then he got burned out, and you know what? They haven't adequately replaced him. And I can go down the list, and now they lost Emeka and Leonard Hamilton too. Two more guys. That's the biggest problem. That is the biggest problem that the ACC has. The number of coaches that they've lost that were all-timers or close to all-timers, and they weren't able to replace them or haven't replaced them or whatever. Period. That's what it comes down to. And I think that's important to note. Really. It's important to note. So, yeah, I absolutely think that, the ACC probably they're going to have to, try and figure out a way to get back on top. But again, it's very hard to do that when, SEC teams are spending twice as much money. I get that. But it's like the ACC isn't poor. They've got to coach better. They've got to be better. They've got to do things better. But it starts with coaching. I mean, you had 4 Hall of Famers in Pitino, Roy Williams, Coach K, and Jim Boeheim. Bennett will be a Hall of Famer. Mike Bray was on the verge of having a Hall of Fame career, and then his last few years he sort of petered out because he got burned out, but he's still a really good coach for a long time. You had 6 guys like that. Jamie Dixon is probably going to be a Hall of Famer at some point. That's 7. That's, almost half the league. Leonard Hamilton, Jim Larinaga, 2 guys that are probably, if they're not Hall of Famers, will be, or on the cusp of it. That's 9. That's the problem the ACC has. That's the problem the ACC has. They've got to figure out how to replace a whole lot of coaching talent. Forget about NIL and all the other crap that we hear about and all the reasons why they can't spend money, blah, 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 blah. I'm telling you, it's about coaching. Period. That's just the way it is. So I don't want to hear about it anymore until, we start to see the guys on the bench do better. As for Pitt, look, this is 7 years now with Jeff Capel. This is 6 now that are going to be without an NCAA tournament berth. I mean, something needs to change. I know they're not going to move on from him, maybe, nor should they. But a few things really need to change if they're going to get better and get to the point where, he's going to start having success again. And that's where it starts. The larger issue, too, it's been 9 years since they replaced Jamie Dixon, and clearly in 9 years they've made the NCAA tournament once. So maybe what he was doing actually was a little bit harder than you think. At any rate, you look at the at the Penguins, and of course, I think one of the biggest things that is interesting is that the Penguins probably are not going to be able to do a whole lot because the guys they could move for something, guess what? To me, they have so many guys. They have so many guys that are basically out there with no trade clauses. I don't know what they can actually do. And so I'm not sure. Listen, they were trying to move Erik Karlsson. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. I'm just not sure where we're going to go. I don't know how they're going to, move around and move some of these contracts and get rid of them. And I just think it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But I just think it's going to be a long, hard process because they still have some bad contracts they can't move, or because of the no trade clauses, they can't move on from. And that's a problem. And so I think that, with the Penguins, I've said this many times. 3 years ago, they should have started moving on from all these old guys. And I know they've got some younger guys, but the two old guys that I'm talking about, they shouldn't have re-signed Tristan Jarry, right? And I would have said that they probably should have moved on even from a guy like Brian Ross, just because, he's a part of a regime, the old regime or whatever you want to call it. And they should have went with a complete youth movement 3 years ago. Because at the end of the day, if they had done that 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, they probably would be like the Capitals right now, where they have an opportunity to win again. And the Capitals have like one, they have obviously Ovechkin and a couple other guys, but for the most part, they've moved on from almost their entire team. And they've had 3 head coaches since they won the Cup. And so even though they had Ovechkin, even though they have, Ovechkin, they had a couple losing seasons in there because they were rebuilding to make sure that they could give him 1 or 2 more runs before the end of his career. The way it looks now, it looks like Sidney Crosby is probably going to retire, say 3 or 4 years from now, having gone, his last 10 years without a real opportunity, or 11 years or something, without a real opportunity to win the Stanley Cup. Whereas if they would have committed to what they needed to do, they'd have gotten better. I don't know. Maybe by now Sidney Crosby would be on a team that has a chance to win again. And I think that's the biggest problem that you have. I just think they're stuck. That's why I think they're not going to be good for a while. I think the Steelers are just going to sort of be where they're at for a while. And, of course, the Pirates do what the Pirates do. But at the end of the day, it's got to get better at some point, doesn't it? And the Penguins haven't made it easy on themselves because, again, I think they were so insistent on trying to stay together and just piece it together that at the end of the day, they just basically wasted 2 or 3 years with mediocre teams under the guise of, well, we're trying to give Sidney Crosby a chance. We can't have him play on a rebuilt team, like on a rebuilding team that's bad. Well, in retrospect, yeah, that's what you should have done, because they'd be good by now, maybe, if you made the right moves. At any rate, we'll do it again tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.